John, and thanks, Tim, for that amazing worship. He just ushered us into, something special. It's so great to be able to do this. This is our second service, full service. It's just amazing to see how this church has progressed from like a life group of, I think, 8 screens on Zoom about 4 years ago, to what it is now. We've got kids playing in the background. We've got kids ministry. It's incredible to see what God is doing in this space. And it's an exciting time to be church planting. In the UK, as well as other nations at the moment, they're going through this, what they're calling a quiet revival, where people are just turning up to church. They don't know. People are just hearing from God. They're having a dream or something is going on that's calling them to the church. It's calling them back to God. And I am so excited to see who he's going to bring through these doors, who he's going to invite and welcome into his family. Last week I explored a little bit about how God, how Jesus had this instantaneous change to Matthew. We touched on those verses last week, and he was just so inclusive. He would just invite people in from diverse backgrounds, and it's kind of like this church. We're from diverse backgrounds. I'm from Zimbabwe. I lived in London for 16 years and then moved here. We've got people from Iran. We've got people from Leeds. We've got people from London. We've got people from Cornwall. You know, we've got a multitude of different people just coming. And most importantly, we've got people from South Tyneside. Most importantly. Yeah. We've got people from Allsend too. Won't forget them. I just shared this one simple thought about how he does it, because on one hand, he's got this inclusive way about him, about gathering different people together, but then he has this exclusive way of living life and his expectation around people. He even says like dangerous things, like you can't even think things. How does he attract people then? How does he get people to not not only can you not do things, can't even think things? And I said it's basically because he practiced what he preached. He did what he said. And I think the word practice is the key word. It's not about getting it right first time. It's not about gritting your teeth or being white-knuckled about it and just trying hard to get it right first time. It's about going on a journey with Jesus towards perfection. And it's lifelong. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen the next day. It's about celebrating the wins and then learning from the mistakes. Now, have you all heard this saying? Because I have. Do as I say and not as I do. I've probably said it a few times myself, but I remember my dad always saying it when he told me like a white lie, or, he told me not to smoke. Like he was puffing away, my boss used to always tell us off for using the fire escape as an easy access to the office. Meanwhile, they did it all the time. They would tell us not to use a password to get into IT systems, not to use each other's passwords. But they would do it all the time. And what it does is we see that, and we see leaders doing that, and it just creates distrust and division. People don't begin to trust them. And I'd like to say that happens in Christian life. People see people on the outside and think, oh, well, they're so polished and they're all going well. But when they're outside, out of eyes view, they're decaying inside. There's stuff going on, there's conflict. And you hear about leaders falling because of that. And I'd like to say that in those times, because there were Pharisees, and the Pharisees would point fingers, and they would look polished, and they would look amazing. I'd like to say that the people that were underneath the Pharisees looked at it and went, do you know what? We see right through you guys. You have no character. You have no idea what it's like to live in my life. And I can see you sinning and doing things wrong. And I'd like to propose, as I said, Christians do that. So there's a famous author. He's passed now. His name is Brennan Manning. And he once wrote this: the single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus by their lips and walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle. And that's what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. Just going to say that again. The single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus by their lips and walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. Now, for me, I was a Christian. I was going about in 2007, 2008. I was a Christian. I was going to a walk. It was an Easter March, and I was walking to St. Paul's Cathedral from, can't remember, but that's beside the point. But I remember witnessing and worshipping Jesus along the way. And I put my knees on St. Paul Cathedral steps. And within an hour of doing that, I was on a tube with a friend who wasn't a Christian. I was swearing. 20 minutes later, I was in a pub drinking. An hour later, I was drunk. Probably a couple of hours later, I was in a nightclub partying until 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. And guess what? I didn't make it to church the next day. And it was Easter Sunday. It was the biggest celebration of it all. I was too hungover. And I'd like to say that we've all done this. All done this. It's about practicing it, getting into the practice of it. And we've seen church splits and church division and church hurt when people have seen leaders do that. People lose understanding and become disillusioned by it. And I know that there are people here that have really struggled in church. And I'd like to say thank you for coming, for sticking with this church, for seeing it progress and being a part of that. I'd like to say thank you for taking a risk on us, but also I'd like to say thank you for continuing to believe that the Lord is good, that God is amazing, and God is worthy of being praised. I'd also like to say that we're not perfect. We're not the perfect church, and we are practicing trying to get this right. So please do come and talk to us. Now, Jesus would have found it really difficult in first century Jewish times to try and operate in that and lead in that lifestyle of division and disunity and distrust that was happening. You can just imagine, I use this example a lot, but you can imagine there's 12 men, and we're not easy to get along like 12 guys coming together, unless it's a stag do, and unless it's something where someone ends up getting hurt, like falling over or something like that. It tends to be, it's really difficult. But Jesus had this way about him. There were 4 fishermen. They were brothers. There were a couple of brothers. There were Nathaniel and Philip, who were like really close friends. So there would have been a lot of division already in this group of 12. But there was also Simon the Zealot and Matthew the tax collector, who we just read about. And Simon the Zealot hated Jews. Zealots hate Jews. Sorry, not Jews, Romans. Get it right. Romans. And they would have hated Matthew for colluding with the Romans as a tax collector. And living out of that, Jesus managed to bring those people together. Incredible case study. And then you see what he's done. He gets them together and work for a common purpose. You see what he's done. He's created the single most biggest voluntary organization institute that you could ever imagine, and that's the Christian church. 2.5 billion people follow Jesus, and a number of them go to church. Now, last week I shared 4 encounters that Jesus had, which resulted in immediate change, like the change that we just heard Matthew have. And that included Peter and Andrew in Luke chapter 5, when Jesus meets him fishing and he invites them to be one of his disciples. The Samaritan woman at the well, where Jesus invites her to drink the living waters. And then Zacchaeus, where he goes round to his house and Zacchaeus confesses that he's stolen from people and he offers to give them back 4 times the amount. There's stories that could almost be paralleled with what's happening now, where people are just coming into church. You know, sinful people that are just coming in, just wanting to know Jesus. It's so exciting to see. I landed on a challenge to the church last week is, do we want to be a church that practices what we preach? Do we want to be a church that practices being like Jesus? We don't have to be Jesus. We can never be Jesus. But we can practice being like him. And what I'd like to do for the rest of this time is just pull out 3 things that I think Jesus did that in these situations that brought about change. And perhaps if we take on those 3 things, if we do those together, we will benefit ourselves, change our lives, but also those around us. Are you with me? Yeah. Firstly, he met them in their own environment and on their own terms. They were safe. So for Matthew, Jesus met him in a tax collection booth. Peter was whilst he was fishing, what he was doing best, going out and fishing. The Samaritan woman, it was by a well outside her town. Remember, he had to go into Samaria, which would have been almost a death sentence in itself. Zacchaeus, he met him in a wealthy palatial home. If we're going to attract people to Jesus, we're going to have to be uncomfortable. We have to go out and meet them, or at least work really hard to make the environment welcoming for those looking in. Just over 12 years ago, I decided to go back to church. I'd been away from church for about 4 years. Something like that event that I described earlier had kind of pulled me away. It made me realize that I was too shameful, too sinful, not good enough to be part of a church or to be in the Lord's favor. And then more. I lived my own life for about 4 or 5 years. Something about some things that had happened in my life just made me started thinking about how I could get back. I started listening to podcasts, and they encouraged me to join a local church. So I went online, as you do, and I found a church that advertised good coffee, nice smiles. There was instrumental music going on. It was acoustic. It felt good. It wasn't in a big church building or anything like that. It just felt like it was in a school hall, and it just felt normal. As I was going, so I've now decided which church I was going to go to. As I was going on the way, I was in the car and I was getting really, really anxious about it. And I had this vision of someone walking through the doors. I was running late, walking through the doors, and I'd be the last person in, and everyone would turn their face and it's him. And I was carried all of this stuff on me. I was like, why? Like, who am I going to share this with? People won't believe what I've gone up to. So anyway, I walked through the door, and there was a guy on welcome, and he noticed my accent, and he said, I'll put you next to a couple of people that you might get along with. So I thought, he's recognised, he's going to put me next to some South African guy. And actually, he put me next to a Zimbabwean. In the middle of the small village in Surrey, he put me next to a Zimbabwean. And then we chatted, and we found out their son went to my school. And he was just a couple of tables away. So we were in a cafe church, so very similar to what we had in the breakfast. It was so nice because we could just chat. And I wasn't like standing in a row and sort of singing to a God that I didn't have a relationship with, but I was actually chatting to people. Because Jesus is inside us. We display Jesus every time we talk, every time we breathe. And so I got that opportunity. It was amazing. And I got to relate to him. And immediately he said to me, I got the sense that God was saying, I see you. I see what you're trying to do. You're welcome into this family. So my point is we never know who's going to come through that door. Well, we've got to show them Jesus. This might be the only opportunity that they ever come into a relationship with Jesus. They've decided to choose this church of all things. We've got that opportunity. Welcome them in and be that family. And, we're in a community centre, we're a church farm. We've got the opportunity to be flexible and do things. And that's why we offer the breakfast and we offer the bright sparks. That's why I really want to encourage all of us to get involved in whatever we can. Just never know. There might be that person that you've got in common, that you do sewing with, that you could swap recipes with. Just never know. The second thing is Jesus was consistent and present. And what I mean by that is he didn't just kind of say, these are 3 things to how to live your life, and this is the best thing you can do, and just move on. No, he chose to be with them. He chose to come and be with them, live first century Jewish life. He chose to get uncomfortable. He chose to win their hearts and be with them. And by doing that, they chose to follow him. They chose, not because they felt they had to, but because they wanted. And that's the difference. Jesus had people that wanted to follow. If you read the dialogue between Jesus and the woman at the well, it's all about her. Jesus invites her into having a conversation about where she is in life. She comes out and says these things, and he coaches her through that. But it's all about her. It's about these living waters that he's described. She comes and drinks them. With Zacchaeus, he's the one that owns up. It isn't Jesus. Jesus doesn't say anything until Zacchaeus says. With Peter, they go fishing. And figuratively speaking, they never stop. And with Matthew, well, he goes and has dinner with all his friends. Doesn't matter. Doesn't care. And he's present enough to tell the Pharisees that what he's doing is absolutely spot on. So I joined a gym recently. I hope some of you have noticed. It was about 9 months ago. 9 months? 10 months ago. And it was November, so 11 months ago. Anyway, I joined the gym, and I go in, and I was on my own, and there were a whole load of people. It wasn't like massively busy, but it was, it's a sleepy time of the day. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's a little bit dark. It's a little bit kind of, there's gym machines, and then there's, weights. And I'd go to the weight section, and I'd be on my own, and there'd be a couple of lads laughing in the background, but largely you're just doing things, just pushing weights, whatever else. And it was quite lonely for a while, and it was hard to keep going if you're doing it on your own. And slowly but surely, by consistently going, we just started having conversation. It was simple stuff like, can I borrow those dumbbells? Or are you done on that machine? Slowly but surely, we started having conversations. About 4 months in, this is blokes, by the way. 4 months in, we realized that a couple of people had the same names as each other. So there were 4 Michaels that were going to the gym at the same time, which is just unreal.
Not funny.
Yeah, definitely. 4 Tims, remember? 4 Tims. But, it was strange. It took us 4 months to get to that stage. 6 months in, someone asked me, do I recognize you? And we'd just done an Easter event, and I said, oh, maybe you've seen me, I'm a pastor, and we did an Easter event at the park, and maybe you've seen us online. He didn't, but from that, a couple of people overheard that, and then they started asking me questions about it. And then, slowly but surely, people would start seeing things online, and they kind of go, oh, you're that pastor, and slowly but surely, we've managed to have conversations, and they're not deep, but at least they're conversations. They're more than just passing each other in the gym or on the streets. And I actually do get to see people on the streets and say hello. And that's great. That's powerful. It's about being consistent, about being present, about going those little times, no matter how hard it is. And that's what Jesus did. He was consistent and he was present. So we talked about him being on his own and meeting people on their own terms. Talked about him being present. And lastly, we're going to talk about him celebrating their wins. That life group, we talked quite deeply about how Peter and Matthew, it must have been a huge thing for them to just kind of give up everything that they knew and go and follow Jesus. It was, you can imagine Matthew was earning loads of money. He was definitely taking a step down. And for Peter, fishing was all he knew. And yet Jesus invited them in, and they got to see their identity. With the woman at the well, Jesus gave her back a sense of identity, removed her shame. If you read the story, she goes to the town, and the town didn't really trust her. And yet she invites them all to come out and meet him. Gives her peace about who she is. With Matthew, he ate with them. I mentioned this already, but he ate with them. Ate with the sinners. He's just, let's go to the pub together. That's pretty much what he said. With Peter actually got on his knees and said, please go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinner. But Jesus actually said, no, mate. Get up. We're going to go fishing together. And this time it's going to be from there. And Zacchaeus, it actually says in Luke 19, verse 9, when Zacchaeus owns up about the money that he's stolen and that he's going to give it back. 4 times the amount, by the way. Is today, salvation has come to this house. That's what he says. Now, in August this year, I went to a conference. It was in a tent. It was called Awaken. And you go there, and it was amazing, actually, weather. It was funny. Everything was perfect about it, to be honest. You worship twice a day. You'd hear a few talks, and there was lots of things to get up to in between. There was some amusement park rides. There was coffee. There was expensive food vans, but anyway, it was great. But I got to meet a friend of mine that I hadn't seen for years. We'd gone to church together, that church that I described right at the beginning, where I was at St. Paul's. It was called Ichthus Church in 2008. Her name was Colleen. She was a lovely, lovely girl. We got to chat, and we actually found out that we'd been away from the Lord for about a few years in between, but we'd both come back. And to be honest with you, I had to be honest with her that I wasn't actually living my best Christian life when I was at that church. But she was so excited to hear about the grace that I talked about earlier, the grace that brought me back, that grace that removed all my shame and all my worries, all my concerns. It got me thinking about that church and my life at that church. And actually, I used to go there once every 2 or 3 times a month, maybe every odd week. But every time they saw me, they would celebrate that I was there. They would celebrate. I'd show up high. I'd show up drunk. I'd show up smelling of booze, smelling of smoke. But they celebrated that I was there. That was the important bit. And that kept me really encouraged. They got me to pray with me. They got to feed me. They got to laugh with me. And they got to show their compassion for others. And that really kept me going. And it's just like Jesus did with his disciples and those he encountered along the way. My point is you'll see many people come through these doors with different agendas, not knowing what they're looking for, not knowing who they're looking for. But we need to show them Jesus. Our response to them will mean whether they fall into a relationship with him or not. To sum up, let's be a church that is prepared to be uncomfortable, meeting people on their own terms and in their own environment. Let's be a church that's consistent and present to what they do and say. But most importantly, let's all celebrate the wins. Let's celebrate the person coming back. Let's celebrate the prodigal. Let's celebrate the new guy coming in. Let's welcome with open arms, pointing them to the hope, the freedom, the forgiveness, the healing, the restoration, and the joy that a life with Jesus at the center brings. Can we pray?